The introduction of a research paper is probably the most important section of that paper. It can be very difficult to write, and it can make or break your paper. How should we write an introduction? First, let me give you some background information about the introduction and its objectives. The objectives of the introduction are very simple. It's to announce your topic and to provide also the context where it takes place. It is also important to provide the rationale for your work. Why do we need this research paper? It's also important in the introduction that you clearly communicate your research objectives or research questions. And what I think might be even the most important part of an introduction is to catch the reader's interest. I like to compare it to a movie trailer. You go to a movie theater at the beginning before you watch the real video, you see different movie trailers. They're very short, like an introduction. And if you see the movie trailer, very often you think, wow, that's awesome. I want to watch that video. And you should convey the same feeling to your reader. The introduction is like a movie trailer that should excite the reader to continue to read your manuscript. What are the components? What is a typical structure of introduction? I've written so many papers and reviewed so many papers. I would like to give you some kind of boilerplate. You don't need to follow that exactly, but I think it can be very helpful. Maybe you follow exactly this structure, and that would help you to write a standardized introduction, which most editors and reviewers would like because they see something they're familiar with. As I mentioned, three subsections in this section: first paragraph, second paragraph, and third paragraph, all combined approximately 2 pages long. The first paragraph, I think that's the exciting one. Think back of a movie trailer, a teaser. You see explosions, you see a romantic scene, a beautiful picture, something that excites readers or the audience. And that would be the first paragraph. The question would be, what do you study and why should we care? Why should we get excited about it? Of course, a research paper is not a movie trailer. There's different way how you can appeal to other scholars, because essentially in a research paper you would like to appeal to other scholars. But even scholars will like something that is exciting. Exciting for scholars could be maybe something like new facts, a new crisis, a new this and that, or maybe new numbers from Wall Street. Or it could be a quotation from a CEO or a failure, something that really catches attention, where you have a feeling, wow, that's exciting. At the same time, you will also set the tone, what your paper is about, very briefly, and you can motivate. Another way how to appeal to different scholars would be based on some kind of scholarly debate. There are two scholars, scholar A, scholar B, and they're arguing about this and that, and we don't know the answer. We would like to find the answer, and so forth. And that's how you can motivate your paper, either through some what we call Wall Street, some business issues, or maybe some kind of scholarly debate, or what we could also consider the ivory tower. Both ways make a good sense. Then the second paragraph. The first paragraph is just a wow effect, but in the second paragraph, then we need to provide some more content. The typical question would be, what do we know? What don't we know? And so what? You would provide a brief literature review. You would provide an overview of the field, of the area. You would review existing research, and while doing it, you would highlight the gaps. Because there are gaps, we need your study to fill these gaps. But it's important not only to fill gaps, because there's so many things that have not been explored before, but nobody is interested in it. So we also have to make our point why it is so important to fill these gaps and what kind of things make it interesting. At the very end of the second paragraph, yeah, I would usually recommend you then to state your research objectives or your research questions. That should be built on the first paragraph and then also in the second paragraph where you review the related literature, and then it's a consequence of that your research question follow logically. Then we have the third paragraph. The third paragraph is about what do we learn from your study. In this section, I recommend you to write about potential or expected contribution. In a research paper, we are mostly interested in theoretical contributions. Yeah, so here you would list. I think that's also extremely important, to be upfront, to be clear yourself what you aim to achieve, what kind of contributions. Later in the discussion, then you can show and elaborate further. So you don't need to present your results and final findings here. In fact, I would not do so, but you would indicate what we could learn from your study. Based on my experience writing and also reviewing papers, let me summarize some do's and don'ts of writing introductions. Let's start with the don'ts. So what would be not good, and sadly what I've seen quite often, is very lengthy introductions, 5 pages. Wow, that's not a teaser anymore. That's already a fully fledged research paper. That's not really exciting. Exciting needs something short and concise. Another typical problem I've seen quite often is the lack of logical flows. I gave you the structure, first, second, third paragraph. I recommend you to follow that. Sometimes I see it's completely mixed. They start with some gaps, some literature review, then some contributions, then later literature review again, then some gaps. Oh, and then again some new gaps and a new important message, a new reference. Wow, where am I? Yeah, that happens all too often. Another problem is that some authors don't provide many references in the introduction. Remember, part of the introduction would be also some brief literature review where you highlight gaps. If you don't provide references, how can we know that there are these gaps, they even exist or don't? So you need to provide some evidence, and you can do so by adding references. Another problem I don't see so often, but sometimes, is these big sweeping statements. Here I think it's important to know what a research paper is. It's not Twitter where you make some sweeping statements and 1 million people like it and so forth. It's a research paper, so that's different. Alright, these are about the don'ts. Please don't do that. Do's, what you should do, what would be good. As already mentioned, the introduction is the most important section of a paper. Then, of course, what it would be good to do is to write it really well and rewrite it. Each sentence should be almost perfect. And then also each sentence should be well connected to the next sentence. So there's a nice flow, this red thread. You really would like to see it. And also what is important, to clearly state the importance of your topic, the gaps, your research objectives, and expected contributions, so that any reader reviewer will easily get it, even half asleep when reading your paper. In some cases, it would help if you define key terms if they're somewhat unusual. Now, let me give you some practical tips for writing the introduction. Many books recommend writing the introduction at the very end, after you've written your whole paper. That makes sense, because then you really know what your paper is about and you can craft your introduction well. Think back of the movie trailer. Do you think movie producers produce the movie trailer first and then the movie? No, of course not. First the movie, and then you take the best action scenes and whatever and put it into the movie trailer to make it really appealing to a potential target audience. Nevertheless, what I still would recommend it, even the final introduction will be written at the end. What I usually do and also recommend is to write bullet points about your key contributions, key gaps, and why it is important, because it's important for writing the paper, so it prepares your paper. You should be clear, have a good idea what are your selling points and what are your main topics, main expected contributions of your paper. And then when writing the paper, you write the theory part, you write the discussion, then you can copy paste. I would be careful, but take some sentence, some ideas and throw them back into the introduction. And later then, of course, I would recommend you to write the introduction new from scratch, not being already confined to certain sentence structures and so forth. In fact, you don't want to duplicate your sentence at all. In terms of length of the introduction, I would typically recommend around 2 pages because it should be concise, so it can be appealing to the reader. Now, coming to an end of this video, let me conclude. I think I can't emphasize it as often as I'm doing it now. The introduction is the most important section of a paper. The first thing any reader will read is the introduction. Thus, I strongly recommend you to spend a lot of time and effort in this section. Improve it, revise it, maybe even start from scratch or over new so it really flows well. It's nice to read and get feedback and that people would like to read the introduction and be inspired and then read the rest of your manuscript. Alright, that's it for now. Good luck. Bye bye.